Welcome back, everybody. It's time to move in towards North America. We'll start in PS4 as per usual. But before we do, want to give you that quick reminder. You just saw that ad right there for it. Council of the Gods event in SMITE. Make sure you do that very, very soon because we do have that Ragnarok Jormungandr skin. He's making lots of waves in the Pro League. You can play him in the mid lane, according to Zeros, and do pretty well. Not according to me. I tried. I fed. But I looked good doing it with Ragnarok Jormungandr.
And not the only goodie involved either with that Council of the Gods bundle. Got to keep in fact just how clean that Artemis onesie is. And it looks, honestly, I wish there was a human version of that, like an adult version for me. Or I guess maybe a kid-sized version.
Yeah, I don't know if adult size is what you need. You'll just like, you'll be swimming in it. Yeah, I would wear an adult-sized version of that. I'd look pretty cute doing it too. Nice. Hey, the onesies I have all look like massive because you don't realize like how much material you need to cover an adult person, but it's a lot. That's why they probably don't have that many adult onesies out there.
Yeah, mine don't look that out of the norm.
Yeah, that
I'm going to be real with you, gamer.
Does not surprise me. Anyways, let's get to the standings here as we're, again, moving in towards North America. Again, we're starting in PlayStation 4. Shrimp Gang has been the top card, and when you hear their roster of Zaxi, Matt Koiz, Covey, Jumpa, Nickwood, it should all make sense to you on why they've had so much success. Big Money Esports, on the other hand, has had some wins, but also the majority of their games have been losses.
A team with a lot of experience and talent to boot versus Big Money Esports, who I think are a team with a lot of potential. And,
sure.
And potential is a really important word here when it comes to Big Money Esports, because we have seen some incredible highlight-worthy moments from this squadron. But at the same time, we've also seen, a couple of offhanded choices that
sure.
might not have necessarily, panned out the best for Big Money Esports, but at the end of the day, I think that this is a team that just continues to improve.
Yes, I think that the entirety of the PS4 league, save Shrimp Gang, because it's all players who have played a bunch on console, just need some time to kind of get to understand what competitive SMITE is like, and it takes any scene that time. I mean, it took the SPL players a long time. It took the Xbox players a long time. It's just nothing. There's no substitute for playing in that environment for a long period of time to understand how to do it effectively and consistently is the big one. You can have your good games, but doing it consistently and working as a unit is something that just takes a lot of time to put together.
And that's something that Shrimp Gang have had, like you've already mentioned. These are all players who, while they might not necessarily all team together in their time on Xbox when it initially debuted, they're still players that know of each other's play styles. They know each other well enough that I think they all feel really comfortable around each other. And when you're not living together, having that online comfort with your team does add a certain level of confidence to your play. Absolutely.
And this team is just full of players that have made big plays in the console scene for a long time. Covey's one of the most storied mid laners in the console scene. You've got Matt Koiz, who's also one of the most storied players in the console scene. Jumpa, who's a world champion. Zaxi, who's been on a ton of teams. Nickwood as well. I mean, these dudes just have been around for a long time, and it's not because they've just found themselves in the right opportunity. It's because they are really some of the best.
They just continue to be better, I think, than a lot who try to challenge them in those respective roles. But this duo lane for Shrimp Gang as well has certainly been making waves. I love the fact of seeing Zaxi paired alongside of Matt Koiz. I think that it's a style of play for Zaxi that he's not necessarily as used to, but it works out really well because Koiz is just so utility focused whenever he plays supports. He's known for the Geb, for the Kepri, gods that are going to keep you alive, and Zaxi needs help staying alive. Trust me, that boy is aggressive.
Sometimes, yes. You can say that he likes to play up in his lanes, but usually for good reason. He does like to pick those gods that get himself ahead in lane. Also has the Chronos in the back pocket, as always. Always was a big Chronos fan, and I think Chronos is in a spot right now where you can play him in a lot of different compositions and find some success.
And Covey as well, not a foreigner to hunters either. In fact, he's played the role enough to know that you can definitely take some of those hunters into the mid lane if chosen.
We'll have to wait and see if that's exactly what Shrimp Gang want to do. They've got the draft wide open, picks and bans ready here for game number 1. And I think these are the types of sets where you're not going in necessarily overconfident, but I think there's a good chance that Shrimp Gang know that they are a pretty heavy favorite in this set. So why not give something a shot if you want to experiment with a pick or a composition that you maybe want to save for the midseason invitational and things like that.
I think as far as these two teams are concerned, it's going to be a lot more complicated for Big Money to find target bans against Shrimp Gang as in comparison to the vice versa. I think Shrimp Gang have seen, or Big Money at least, have alluded to the fact that they really enjoy gods like the Daji for their jungler. We've seen a lot of Poseidon and Giannis for this Big Money squad as well in a lot of their previous sets, but their mid laner might not be the same mid laner that we've been seeing, so that could cause for some shakeups in their drafts as well.
Yeah, Spartan was the mid laner for this team for a long time. There have been some talks on Twitter about him being there or not being there, so I'm just going to wait and see when we load in who exactly is playing in the mid lane here for Big Money Esports. As Xbalanque is their first pick, we saw a lot of success with that in that last set that we just watched, Taco. I think that this is a perfectly fine first selection.
But just like that, Shrimp Gang already know how to best combat against that Darkest Night, so they bring in the team fighting protective auras that Eagles Rally is going to be able to provide, and not only that, but a Kefri. And the big thing about Darkest Night that really sells it for teams in their drafts is because you're able to kill somebody typically before the enemy team has a chance to even look for peeling on them, but Kepri kind of negates all of that. You toss out one Scarab's Blessing, and the fight's pretty much over.
But Ao Kuang Execute does get through that Scarab's Blessing, and that's exactly where Big Money Esports is going to go with their jungler selection. I imagine this is in the jungle, though Ao Kuang can solo, I think, fairly effectively. Ao Kuang is one of those gods that I see a ton in ranked, but not that much in competitive. Why do you think we see it here for Big Money?
He usually gets punished pretty heavily in competitive play because there's comms, and I think that's the #1 reason why AOs tend to not have as much, unless you're Johnny. Johnny kind of just, he doesn't make sense when it comes to AO play. But everybody else that we've seen that tries to pilot the AO is usually met with that brick wall of just no collectively, because teams at competitive levels, especially season ones like Shrimp Gang, are probably just gonna collapse around their carry. Whoever gets into that execute threshold is just going to be smothered by their own team in a protective coating.
Have to wait and see if that's going to be enough, though, to make sure that's going to keep everyone from Big Money Esports at bay. Do want to say that it looked at the check-in form here this week for Big Money Esports, and Panda Mid is the one that they've written down. There are some subs there, so it could be someone different, but if Panda Mid is in the mid lane, this is a guy with some experience in the mid lane, though not a lot of, experience on winning teams so far.
But never too late to try and change that. And Big Money are a team that I think have found enough success of their own before Panda Mid that having him now being added to the team, I don't think is a bad look for them at all. And in fact, this composition that they've even rounded out for, I like the Cuckoo Khan at the very end. It's a god that I think Covey has a lot of history on, and not only that, but the Cuckoo is just going to give them a lot of space control for Big Money Esports, and that's going to be important when working with the Kuzumbo.
A 4 magical composition for Big Money Esports. Xbalanque the only physical, so could just stack a lot of that magical prot, and this Ao Kuang and Cuckoo Khan might have some trouble. Big Money Esports already with their work cut out for them. Shrimp Gang, again, undefeated in the region, looking to keep it that way. Let's throw it over to the casters for Game 1.
Thanks, Aggro. Thanks, Taco. Finch and Anatoly on the call. Shrimp Gang up against Big Money, Big Stacks Esports. We'll see how well they'll do. Like Ryan said, they are leaning a bit into magical damage here this time. A little bit more than normal. Going to be very much relying on conviction on the Xbalanque to even that out.
And the thing is, normally when you have an Ao Kuang in the jungle, you want to compensate by having maybe a hunter in the mid lane. The most common hunter to pair up with that is the Uller. Back in Season 3, that was a very common strategy. Trying to just get off a lot of burst damage potential, get the combo of Uller off, force out those early beats so you can get somebody in the execute threshold. But now Panda Mid playing this Cuckoo Clan, I think they're more focused on these little small skirmishes in the jungle corridors.
Well, one of the threads I've been talking about in every format is where do these supports go early on, and Matt Koiz has elected to come join the solo laners. That's much more like what we see in the SPL right now. Meanwhile, Xerxes has stuck with conviction over in the dual lane and has netted them some pressure on this purple buff on the Chaos side. But in response, Matt Koiz and Nickwood steal away the blue buff from Snados, And that should hurt him. You very much need this blue buff early on as the Sobek.
Oh, absolutely you do as a Guardian player specifically. And that's why Matt Koi's picked up the blue buff as opposed to Nikwit that doesn't need mana necessarily to clear the wave, but Privative doing a good job making sure that 2 blue buffs aren't going to go the way of Shrimp Gang.
Well, now that could hurt Shrimp Gang because I think they gave it over assuming Nikwit would get his own.
Yes.
And now he'll be without it. So that was a very, very good pickup from Privative to come grab that in response. So good job by him rotating over. He's on the Alkwang this game. Is able to water illusion away from Jumpa here on the Pele, but they're going to be relying a lot on his damage, his execute, to try and match what Pele is going to be doing over there in the hands of Jumpa.
And Panda Mid was solo farming that whole time, hitting level 3 first is a good look for him, getting his own red buff as well, and that could be the idea now that Big Money Esports leans on a little bit, this higher level Cuckoo Clan to maybe go for the early ultimate onto somebody to get them under that execute threshold.
And they do have some setup, right? The pluck is guaranteed. It should be as long as you guys are on the same page for any follow-up from a big mage, and Kuko Khan has his ult about as big mage as you can get with his ultimate. So I like that idea. Maybe get him ahead, has some synergy between him and some of the rest of the control. Even if Alkwang comes in, not for the execute, but just knocks them up with his ultimate.
That's true.
That's actually pretty decent setup. So I wonder if that's sort of the idea to play around this Kuko Khan.
Yeah, that probably would be your best go-to if you're... Because you're not going to see Snaddles for a while. He's going to be chilling in that solo lane. You might see some setup from Xerxes rotating over on this Kuzenbo. You got the Watery Grave, which is like a bunch of little mini knockups. And if you're close enough on the Cuckoo Clan, you don't need the biggest setup in the world. You could still kind of follow through with it, as Xerxes can also sumo slam somebody closer in a direct line there, going for the sprint option. Some Kuzenbos look for the blink every now and then, but that's such a good point that you make, Finch. The fact that you don't always have to use the Alkwang execute for the execute, right? Like, you could just use it for the setup.
You certainly could, as there is a little bit more fight over this blue buff. The 2v2, though, favoring the team that doesn't have a Khepri, at least right now. It's a lot of damage on the Matt Kois. He gets plucked back in by the charged prey, but already given up on this one is Privative. He just goes back to secure the buff. So that means no real danger there for Matt Kois, but not only can the Kukan kind of follow up with the Alkwang to go back to your other point, but he can kind of drop the ultimate at his feet, and it does hit a little bit behind him too.
A little bit.
So if Jumpa's there on him, there's some room for a little bit of self-peel. At least there's a knock up there, at least a little bit of way to create some space here for Panda Mid.
And something that Panda Mid's probably going to be taken advantage of is this Book of Thoth. A little bit of changes in Season 6 as it only gets an extra magical power based on your power from item, or your mana from items,
right,
as opposed to general mana. But there is a power curve that works out in that mid to late game where it's more favorable, actually, as long as you're dedicating yourself to mana items throughout the build.
Especially on Kuko Khan in particular, who has always synergized particularly well with the Book of Thoth, and still does even to this day. So I love Panda Mid rushing this. It's kind of a keystone item for these Kuko Khans in the middle lane. I do want to talk some about the duo lane. One thing that benefits Shrimp Gang from this start is that Xaxi is getting plenty of farm to himself. He's a little bit ahead right now of Conviction. He likely will stay that way. And this is what I'm talking about with the ult. Drops it early, and it gets him out of danger.
Oh, good juke as well, preventing that Apple of Discordia from doing anything. Kobe splitting the uprights there. And that was a great ultimate from Panda Mid, because the knockup itself prevents the abduct from lasting long enough, and therefore disrupting the whole engage Shrimp Gang planned out.
It was so the self-peel ideal was correct, just not the right target. It was Matt Kois making the rotation over that had Panda Mid in some distress. And you're right, Covey there unfortunately couldn't land the apple. It was good jukes as well from Big Money Esports to get away from Jumpa's damage in that volcanic lightning, those extra cone autos, just making sure that cone doesn't come out and do extra damage. So Big Money barely survive and engage in mid. Though Panda Mid's beads are down, he is still vulnerable next time.
And they probably could have dove that, but it would have been a very risky play to try to utilize the passive from the Pele for the lifesteal. Not tanky, not really too much damage coming from him, so better safe than sorry. Matt Kois was only level 3 at the time, so you don't have your Scarab's Blessing, but look for Shrimp Gang's aggression once that Scarab's Blessing is available.
Xerxes pulled back in. Jumpa's there along with Kobe for good damage, but the tanky Kuzenbo shrugs it off. He went tank boots to get things started, becoming more and more popular for some of these Guardians. And makes some sense, though. I don't think Shrimp Gang are done just yet. They want to contest the purple buff, and they get there in time. The abduct lands. The knockup is there, too, but Sumo Slam gets Xerxes out.
Without the ultimate from the Pele or also Kovi's Discordia, you're just going to have to let that one go. A nice attempt to steal away the purple buff, and they're traveling together. And that's important, Finch, because when you're making plays at the enemy side of the jungle, you might not necessarily know exactly how many people are there. So if you could just at least pretend like, okay, we know where 2 of them are, so if there's going to be at least 3 MIA, we'll have 3 of our own in case worst comes to worst.
That's a good point. Try to travel in packs and have a buddy so you don't get caught out. I do want to point out the lead that Xerxes has in dual lane has hit a relevant threshold in that he finished Devour's Gauntlets first. And so he's already gotten about 16 stacks ahead of where Conviction's going to be on those Devil Gloves. Conviction did just finish it, so that should put an end to the building of that lead if he can make it back and catch this wave. But that's nice for Xerxes to get started there.
And even Tier 1 boots on top of it, so the Jingwei going to have a little bit of extra mobility, 6% to be exact, as if the Jingwei passive wasn't enough, going to have that. And I like the fact that Xerxes, without much to do in the jungle side on the left side of the map, just kind of freezing the wave casually, knowing Conviction did have to back to complete those Devil Gloves.
It does deny him not just some farm, but some of those stacks as well to further push Xerxes towards completing those Devour's Gauntlets and grabbing that small power spike advantage. Nikwit, though, in the solo lane, elected to go right into the Ninja Tabi. A lot of the times we see Ballonas go right into the Berserkers, but he's got the Ninja Tabi. Well, let's talk about it later. Conviction in some trouble. The knockup not going to land. That's a good job with his own ultimate, making it hard for them to see, and he survives.
Just no ultimates used, whereas they're forcing out the Darkest of Night. So 1 for nothing in that regard, and also a lot of damage onto Conviction, so that's going to allow also more aggression from Xerxes. He was freezing the wave earlier, and he could probably do so again.
Certainly could. That's them playing into that lead that Xerxes, the light lead that Xerxes developed. Certainly not the end of the world or anything like that, but a small one. Bring Jumpa over to further exacerbate that. But yeah, totally. Do you like starting with the Ninja Tabi over there for the Bellona?
Well, it makes sense because it's against the Guardian, so there's not that much sustain that you're going to need.
Right.
Like, Snatos is not going to be poking you out to all high heavens, where the Scourge is not enough to deal with that poke, right?
Sure.
If there's any sort of god that you're dealing with where you think they will outtrade you through your Scourge, that's when you might need to consider getting Berserker Shield. So Ninja Tabi, I don't mind it necessarily, especially if you're going to be looking to make rotations. If you're invading blue buff, that extra mobility could be the difference of saving your life or not.
Well, Snatos is the one completing the invade here up against the Bellona. I wonder how much the magic damage dealer factors in too, as a big ultimate lands on the Kovi, and who's there to handle it? Privative, I think he beans to get away from the ultimate.
Yes.
No, what happened there? Kovi still has it.
Oh, he still has the bees, exactly. Maybe there just wasn't enough.
Is it a cleanse right when you cast it? Maybe that's it. The actual like stun that lands if you time it perfectly. Instead of getting eaten through the execute, it cleanses the actual start of it.
That could have been it, actually. A very interesting interaction between the Khepri ultimate and the Ao Kuang execute, because Scarab's Blessing doesn't stop executes completely. So doing it that timing was just utterly perfect.
It actually absolutely was for Matt Koiz, and as much as I like Matt, I doubt it was that perfect because it's such a narrow window to hit. But I mean, it has to have been though, right? Because putting the Scarab's Blessing on it for the execute does nothing.
That's true.
So it must have been him looking for that exact window and that exact
yeah, it cleanses them. So
that's exactly
the
what it was.
timing window is
that's
just so
insane,
perfect.
Isn't it?
Yeah, because if you Scarab's Blessing first and then execute,
he'd be dead. Kovi would have died.
Wow.
Also, did Kovi know? Because he held bees.
He did hold the bees.
That's insane, right?
The trust in your support. There's so many. Hold that thought, though. A big engage in the mid lane. Great Spirit of the 9 wins.
Yeah, that takes down Jumpa. Even Matt Koiz is low in a bit of trouble now, but he'll make it back out. Xerxes went aggressive for the red buff steal, but they can't catch him out. And so Shrimp Gang, unfortunately, ended up dropping a member trying to look for the invade.
But they did get the red buff at least. Privative going to take a little bit of poke out of Kovi. And the trust that Kovi has in Matt Koiz, because we've seen it so many times, Finch, where there's a Geb shield that comes out, but you still use bees, you still use Aegis specifically. But in that instance, in that brief split moment, it's like, I got you. It's like, would you take a bullet for me? Yes.
You know, I want to ask them, but for no matter what, they're going to say yes, right? Like, so I don't even know. That's awesome, man. I loved that interaction and the way they got away from that one. So very well played between them. Unfortunately, they end up losing Jumpa. There was no very cool Scarab's Blessing there for him, and he takes about 500 to the face courtesy of Panda Mid on this Kukulkan.
Still a big advantage for Zaxi. He's trying to bully Conviction out even further there. The difference is about 30 stacks between these two hunters. That's 5 waves, so you're looking at about 2.5 minutes difference between fully stacked Devil Gloves versus not. And 2.5 minutes, which is about to be completed in, let's say, another 2 minutes. So the difference between 13 minutes and 15.5 or so, that's Gold Fury time. Prime real estate on the left side of the map, and that's enough of a power play, or power curve rather, for Zaxi to force it.
It certainly is. It's not the only one that's interesting, though. We talked about that Berserker Shield from Niquid, and I was wondering if the magical damage from Snados was part of that decision-making, and maybe so. He goes into the Shoguns, which does a lot of the same stuff except for the sustain, obviously, but also makes him stronger against everyone else on the map except Conviction, which also makes the fact that they're kind of giving Zaxi this lead over him in duo even better. The only physical damage dealer is a little bit even further behind.
And that's important for Shrimp Gang to take advantage of. Privative taking a lot of damage, actually. Forced the Water Illusion away. Surprised to see Zaxi hold on to that airstrike.
And my man doesn't need any more stacks. He's in a good spot as the ultimate comes through. It does secure the buff and even hits Zaxi way in the back. But all the way pushed up forward is Jumpa, though. That's a really good watery grave. It just does not stop the Jing Wei. That'll complete the Devourer's gauntlets and find him a kill. And Xerxes should be dead to rights as well. No, Mad Kois. That was way off the mark. It doesn't matter. They find the kill either way.
Zoning route, no matter what. And now sprinting away together. Nice. The execute from Privative will find the target onto Mad Koi. Zaxi gonna finally use that airstrike. Jumpa in a 1v2 trying to run away, but it's a speed buff Ao Kuang.
It is speed buff Ao Kuang. He doesn't have his abilities, but Privative has now missed 2 of his abilities.
No.
And that's created a space for Jumpa to get away. A bit of a sloppy engagement there, but one that comes out in favor of Shrimp Gang. I believe that was 2 for 1 in their favor. So a very, very strong fight for them to start turning things around a little bit. And that was Zaxi just being aggressive.
Oh, absolutely. Should be aggressive with the advantage that he has, as Panda Mid had to use that ultimate defensively to secure his own red buff. But after dying, not going to get the benefits of said buff. Now actually going for an interest. Is this going to be double stacking Warlock Staff on top of the Book of Thoth?
Very interesting. Maybe it's Jim at this point?
No, that's a different icon.
He's in the wrong tree.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's a Warlock
Staff.
Staff. That is a Warlock Staff and after Book of Thoth.
Very greedy, right? Isn't it? I mean, it's very slow.
It is.
It is a lot, though. If he can get that finished off, it's a huge power spike for this Kukulkan, obviously, and it'll make him that much harder to kill, but it just seems too slow. I feel like Spear in this spot would definitely do a lot of work.
You're delaying penetration quite heavily, and on top of that, it takes about 8.5 to 9 minutes to fully stack up Warlock Staff, or Book of Thoth for that matter. So you're not getting your real power curve that you need. So let's say hypothetically he finishes it now at 14 minutes. You're not going to see much usefulness about until the 23.5, 24-minute mark.
Still a long ways away from that one being finished. Maybe worried about all this extra duress and just wants some HP. We'll see where it is that he goes when he finishes that off, though, as Niquid happily 1v2s. He knows the cavalry is almost here, though the route a bit off the mark. They'll settle for the blue buff steal instead, and Niquid should be able to happily walk away.
No red buff available on the left. Take away the blue on the right side, wherever the action is away from Panda Mid.
This is Gold Fury. They recognized there was too much present on the right-hand side, so big money came directly to the Gold Fury. It's only Zaxi who can try and stop this with the airstrike. He'll have a chance, but it's just too big of a no from the Kukulkan. They secure the objective. What about the fight on the back end? Big money are out. That's a clean Gold Fury.
Xerxia very low there. Jumpa could potentially go on him. I don't know if he recognized that the Sumo Slam was not available to him. Now is Kobe in trouble in mid.
Yeah, Privative knows if he can just get just enough damage. Snado's actually forced out the beads. It's a big grab from him to make Kobe much more vulnerable on this Discordia going forward. Tier 1 tower in right goes down as the scuffle in mid peters out.
Privative. Not the healthiest of bunches, but neither is Jump. And now taking a 1v1 fight, Panda looking to return the favor. Does hit the Squall.
Yeah, that first ability does so much damage. The apple hunts him down, but can't quite connect. That would have been very necessary damage from Kobe. Over the top, though, goes Niquid. Forces Panda Mid's beads out as well, but no more aggression. Just a bit of a relic win, and so far, big money hanging with the top dog.
Absolutely are, and that's important because Panda Mid, we talked about his build before, it has a big power curve. But when you're finding picks like that off of your other members where Privative finds a kill, Snados is assisting in the matters and forcing beads out of Covey. This Cuckoo Clan is transitioning very well in this mid to late game, I'd say, despite already having only one death.
Certainly was that Warlock staff. Goodness gracious. So yeah, it'll be a while for that's done, but we'll certainly see. In response, Shrimp Gang have doubled down on more magical defense. The Ankile now completed for Jumbo. We just saw Matt Coy stop, and by that, I believe the Spellbound Kusari, the tier 2, so he's working on a little bit more magic defense for himself as well. A lot available to Shrimp Gang to try and slow down this damage, and like you said, it's Pen that's delayed by going for this Warlock staff, so he'll have a harder time shredding through.
Divine Ruin picked up from Kobe, trying to limit some of the healing coming out from Snados. The Bancroft's talent healing from Privative as well. Conviction with double sustain from the Aussie and the Devo Gloves. So going to be good opportunity for him. But he needs to land some of these apples because right now he's off the mark in most of them. And that's going to, when you're not getting that big burst of magical damage, the physical defense goes a long way for big money.
It's a cripple too. I mean, it's a lot that it would help if that was connecting. As Zaxi having trouble with this trade. Conviction, despite being down a level and a half, and with the Ichvile there for Zaxi, comes out way on top in that trade, forces Zaxi to retreat.
But he still has a 2-level lead, though, Zaxi, so he's still going to be this lane bully, opting to go for the Ichvile as opposed to the Aussie because he's looking for these boxing exchanges, wanting to reduce some of the attack speed coming from Conviction. That has a decent amount, I'd say, between the Ninja Tabai and the Aussie. So he's looking for any advantage he can.
Anything to slow him down as Nickwood continues to be a bully on the right-hand side of the map. They're contesting this Pyromancer as Big Money have it pulled. They know they've got the big time confirm, and of course the Kukulkan ult secures it. Nickwood pulled back in by the Sumo Slam, but that's just put the Warrior right where she wants to be, right next to the Mage. And Panda Mid's having some trouble getting away. That's good damage, but not enough for the kill. Great tail whip from Snados at the tail end.
Preventing the bludgeon, but it's Xerxes now in a little bit of trouble.
There's
Does get the root off, but no one followed up off of it. A great apple for damage. The root on top of the fact. Just a dropped kill, I think.
Snados and the Lurking in the Waters might have deterred them, the slow and all that extra damage that was for sure going to come through. But yeah, they had a good chance. Xerxes was low, so they definitely could have got him. Maybe they just worried they'd lose too much in trade.
But the thing was, when Panda Mid is using these ultimates to confirm objectives and it doesn't hit anybody in the team fights, why aren't you taking that fight? That is a huge ultimate not available now to Big Money Esports.
Yeah. It certainly is, as now Panda Mid is starting to work on that pen. We were talking about how much he needed it. That's going to mean that he's even scarier in these next fights, even if you can't find him. Privative, yeah, this is not a fight for you, good sir. You recognize that he's definitely in some trouble. Stone of Gaia next for Nickwood. His build path entirely different from what we normally see going into this matchup.
Has a lot of health if you're going to get knocked up by the Sobek, by the Kuzenbo, Watery Grave, even by the Spirit of the Nine Winds. You're going to get even more sustained, so I love it. It's a great item.
It certainly is. You get that nice passive for a little bit of extra HP, and he'll just have, like you said, a big HP pool in general to go with. So it's certainly not going to be not going to hurt him. He doesn't have to build the same way you normally do. He doesn't have to worry as much about building physical defense in this match. It's mostly towers or conviction that he's worried about in that regard. So he's free to kind of stretch out a bit.
And normally whenever you're building Stone of Gaia, you want to synergize that a little bit more with the Meditation Relic, but against the composition from Big Money Esports, Thorns is screaming to be picked up, so I like that mindset from Nickwood.
That's right. If he goes and chills in that tornado for a bit, that's damage that Panda Mid can't take back, as Matt Coy's looked like he was trapped, but it's Xerxes that was trapped in there with them. Zaxi rotates over, and Shrimp Gang just had more friends nearby. They find the support. It's 5v4 in their favor. And what do you know? The Primal Fury now up. A great time to have a man advantage. They want more. They pull in one more target, but a big ultimate comes through. Just doesn't find anybody, unfortunately, from Panda Mid.
Snados trying to run away with Lurking in the Water. Meanwhile, Panda Mid is left to his own devices right next to Privative. And with that one pick with the damage dealt onto Snados and Panda Mid, no ultimate, that's a free objective for Shrimp Gang.
Totally. Does Privative have enough damage the way he started this off? It's cooldown boots, demonic grip, Bancrofts?
I'm not in love with this build, honestly, because if you're going to go cooldown builds, you might as well invest into like Breastplate of Valor and go all in with like Spirit's Robe at that point. But like Shoes of Focus is just so unnecessary in this build. Like you might as well go Traveler Shoes for the mobility in the MP5 in the early game.
Probably the third worst boots out there.
Yeah, right? So I don't know. You either go pen boots or traveler shoes
Yeah.
on Ao Kwang. I'm not in love with shoes of focus.
I think I'm somewhat persuaded by this start too. We'll see though. Ao Kwang not always looking for those mid-game fights anyway, so if this build takes a little longer to curve out for him, that's not too bad. This team in general is happy fighting late with when the Xbalanque rotates over. They'll have a Kuzenbo in the late game too, so not too bad.
There could be instances in certain games where you kind of are forced to go shoes of focus because of a big team fight that's about to break out and you don't have that extra 50 gold to get the penetration boots.
Like maybe you wanted to just get out of there right away with some kind of power spike.
Instead of waiting like the 15 to 16 seconds.
That's right. It could be a while. What is it? 3?
Yeah, it's 3.
3 per minute that you get. So yeah, it could definitely take a bit of a while. It was Divine Ruin next for Panda Mid. We were talking about where he was going to go with this pen, and Divine Ruin what he goes to right away. Up against Pele, that makes some sense. There's a ton of sustains you can get off that pass.
And also Niquid, right? Because you hit him with your Spirit the 9 wins, you're knocking him up, you're proccing the Stone of Gaia to get that 15% max health over the next 5 seconds. So mitigating some of that healing as well.
Maybe not the strongest, it's just the flat pen there, so still going to be a good amount of relevance from these double Shogun Kasaris coming out from Niquid and Matt Koiz as Privative realizes just how much damage a level 20 Jingwei can do that's been free farming all game. He'll have to back out.
Yeah, a little bit behind his Privative and not going to be able to exchange blows in that regard. Missing a couple of the abilities allows Shrimp Gang now to rotate over to the right side of the map, and if they can keep baiting out these fights to force Panda Mid to use that ultimate preemptively, they could do things like this.
Well, nice job with the bees there from Panda Mid. Gets him out of there. Matt Koi's a bit overcommitted. They pluck him right back into the tower. He doesn't have much physical defense at all, but still does not have the Scarab's Blessing procced. And Snados will be right there waiting, perfectly timed to take down the bug.
A little early on the Scarab's Blessing, but Big Money Esports not mad about that. 5-on-4 now for 35 seconds with that pick, and also 2 ultimates available to them. They're going to head over to the Pyromancer.
Yeah, when Matt Koiz doubles down on magic defense, plucking him into the tower is, I feel like, about the best thing you can do to punish him with a little bit of extra damage from the structure than he might be used to. And he kind of panicked into the Scarab's Blessing. Now Pyromancer on the cards, but it's actually Shrimp Gang, surprisingly, who are pulling in. Maybe trying to bait in Xerxes, but Conviction! Oh no, he's too close. He got blown up.
He's going to have to use that Rising Jaguar away. Spirit of the 9 wins going to peel Niquid for the moment. Is it enough? Not with the blink out of Jumpa.
He comes over the wall, still had the auto attacks from Volcanic Lightning. That's just how good Pele's ultimate is. Even if that initial hits miss, you still hold on to that proc, which can be quite nice. And now he's looping around to clean out some of this jungle. The tier 1 tower still stands, but Niquid is aggressing it.
Jumpa gonna do this
not a part of
speed
it.
buff. Come on.
I kept thinking he was gonna come over here to the fight, but he's like, nah man, there's jungle.
He's like, but what if the speed buff's up? Oh, it is up. You know his eyes lit up. Because he probably thought, like, there's no way the speed buff's up, right?
Well, Panda Mid's been rooted. Aegis is nice, but I doubt he makes his way out of this one. Though they haven't committed, and the apple off the mark. Panda Mid dodges everything, and somehow they don't get that kill. And that should be a kill.
That has to be a kill, Finch. There's no ultimate available for Panda Mid. There's only 10% cooldown reduction in his build, and the fact that Shrimp Gang doesn't invest a dive there under a tier 1 tower, like while Niquid is basically physically tanky enough with a Void Shield, plenty of health with a Stone of Gaia and the Winged Blade now. A very important kill to get.
I think so too, and unfortunately they could not slow him down. And remember, Panda Mid's gone with this greedy start to his build, and they have not been able to punish him at all. If they let this game go a little bit longer, he'll have double pen online to go with these big power bank items of the Book of Thoth and the Warlock staff, and he'll have got there for free.
That's right. Just now finishing off the last stack at 24 minutes, so the timing window matched up, but the problem was that, like you said, Shrimp Gang were just not able to get the kills, and it was good peels from Xerxes. Panda Mid peeling for himself from time to time as the Gold Furies were done by Big Money Esports with this objective. Even though you don't have pen, against objectives, you don't necessarily need the penetration. So I think Big Money's game plan was to not take these fights until the power curve from Panda Mid reached the penetration status.
That's right. They've been looking to sneak these objectives. Maybe even not sneak them, just know that Shrimp Gang can't contest because they have the superior confirm with that giant ultimate from the Kukulkan. Khan. And up till now, it's worked for them. They've been able to keep even with Shrimp Gang largely just through controlling the Pyro and these Furies, which must have been taken twice now since we're back to the Gold Fury respawning at the very least. Shrimp Gang are nearby. They know that this is a place Big Money want to be, so they showed up.
5-on-5 so far. Xerxes going to get rooted out and abducted. Zaxi setting up the persistent gust, but through the abduct, it didn't matter.
Man, they push him through that damage, and there, look, this is all conviction. There's not nearly enough protection to slow him down. Big ultimate lands. It's just barely not enough, but finally ends up getting procced. That might have been Snados that got there a little bit too soon. So Jump was able to clean up Panda Mid in the back, and what looked like a good fight is starting to turn in favor of Shrimp Gang.
Just a little too aggressive, and without the Aegis, Panda Mid falls as the first victim of the scuffle. A couple of backs now using the teleport, but Snados going to cancel that one out.
This is somewhat good news, though, how cleanly that Conviction was able to put damage into Nickwood. That is somewhat of a good sign for them. But this is not so much. Jumpa goes right on top of the Shimbalanke to try and hunt him down. Volcanic Lightning available. Aegis blocks out the first shot, but this is Pele all day long. Conviction and Pandamid, both carries go down, and Kobe finds the third. Out Kwong taking a seat.
It's going to be a 3-pick fight for Shrimp Gang, now going for the Gold Fury. A great pick onto Panda Mid, making sure that Aegis wasn't coming out. Snados actually trying to do what he can on the backside, just now getting lurking in the water available to him. Gonna narrowly avoid that abduct and look for a kill onto Kobe.
This is still good. This whole time they cannot do the objective, and Kobe avoids the damage, so Snados will die. At least forces out the Aegis on the back end, and the Eagles rally from Nickwood. I don't know how necessary that was, but the Gold Fury should be theirs. And totally, to me, this comes down to them proccing the ult on Nickwood too early, the Scarab's Blessing.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that, because Snados does 3 things a little incorrectly there. Number 1 was that ultimate proc a little too early onto the Scarab's Blessing target of Nickwood. Number 2 was he used the tail whip as he was killing the ward. He hit it twice, and then he tail whipped before the third attack, allowing Nickwood to come into the fight again. So that would have been at least
teleport in,
yeah, while he was teleporting in, right? So that would have been at least a 4-on-4 for a little bit, but instead Nickwood comes in. It's a 5-on-4 again.
That's almost 2 lives they gave Nickwood.
Yeah. And then the third one was then sacrificing his life now at the very tail end of this fight, allowing Shrimp Gang to still utilize their 5-on-4 advantage on the right side of the map.
That's a great point. It really does all come down to that, because they committed so much to kill this Bologna. The Panda Mid ultimate was committed on top of that one as well. They baited out Matt Koi's ultimate, but because they give it that max value, they end up losing it. Now it is favoring Shrimp Gang by about 5k, and they bait in Xerxes by starting up the enhanced Fire Giant. He's abducted in the middle of the sumo slam, knocked up as well. That means he has to use that watery grave and Conviction's ultimate, the Darkest of Nights. This has been very clean from Shrimp Gang so far.
And Shrimp Gang didn't have to use any ultimates,
Nothing.
no relics as well on top of it. Nickwood did use Thorns, I believe, in the middle of that tornado, but other than that, I think he'll be fine knowing that they have complete dominance on this right side of the map. Lighting up the Fire Giant with the Sentry Wards gives them the potential to go for it if they really want to, but without using the Cuckoo Clan ultimate, I believe Shrimp Gang are too fearful of starting that objective.
That's a good point. As much as they successfully baited out, the key ultimate, the one that Panda Mid is holding on to so carefully, is that ultimate from him. That's what gives them the best confirm in the game of these 10 players over this enhanced Fire Giant. And so Shrimp Gang have to respect it. Though I do think they could have very likely still threatened out Big Money and at least maybe baited a couple more things.
Definitely. Without the Watery Grave or Darkest of Nights, a lot of damage was taken by Xerxes, so maybe they could have went for it. Hard to say, but rather safe than sorry.
Sure.
As we're approaching the 29-minute mark, Shrimp Gang does have about this 5,000 goal lead that can still be a bully, but the damage is now available for Panda Mid. He has his Divine Ruin, the Obsidian Shard, as well.
Looks like we do have a pause coming out, though, from Nickwood. We'll get everything sorted out with these players and get you right back into the action. I do want to ask, though, do you think they've doubled down onto the Magic defense enough on the side of Shrimp Gang? They do have the Shoguns and the Genjis there for the tank for the support, but I don't know. It feels like it could be a little bit more.
You could always go for more defense, but then you got to respect the damage coming from Conviction at the end of the day. So I believe it was a 5th item, Void Shield, coming out of Nickwood, knowing that, all right, this is when team fights are going to be happening. This is when we need to be able to try to look for something against Conviction.
Right, and he did go into the Sovereign Release towards the back end, and you're right, maybe that's paying some eye towards him, because even Nickwood is building kind of in the middle, right? Void Shield, Zone of Gaia, Wingblade. Only the dedicated Magic defense of the Shoguns is Privative, takes a ton of damage. And that's another good point. This Ao Kwong has been largely held in check for 30 minutes now.
That's true. Only with 2 kills thus far, having some more penetration in his build with that Spear of Desolation. looking like they want to do something at the tier 2 tower on the right side of the map, but Privative not really here for the defense.
Well, much harder for Big Money to steal away a tier 2 with the Panda Mid ultimate. Maybe that's the idea, is to try and avoid giving that Kukulkan that situation where he's strongest. But to be fair, Tornado also very good in sieging. So
yeah.
That's another thing they got to worry about.
Nickwood gonna kind of keep that Tornado in check.
Ooh.
Privative in a 1v1, not winning that one against Jumpa.
Nah, that ain't for you, sir. Jumpa's ahead of him even in terms of item build too, so that was going to be a very tall task for him. Optimistic at best, and Jumpa, even though he's low, is still coming to join the fight. The tier 2 tower goes down. Big Money can't afford to stick around to defend that one, so it's extra gold now in the pockets of Shrimp Gang.
Yeah, that Pele passive coming out big for Jumpa for sure. I believe Privative didn't have Telekines completed. It was only tier 2
Yes, for sure.
during that fight, and that could have been the difference between finding the kill or not.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jumpa was done with his build in that fight, so it was very ambitious for Privative to try and take that one. He did at least get the beads out from the Pele, because he wasn't going to be able to find the execute, but he was going to be able to get that knock-up we were talking about, at least buy himself some time. So Jumpa kept up the pressure by expending the beads.
And Jumpa, with the difference between these two players' beads, Privative didn't have it for that little scuffle. And
Right.
not being able to prevent the knock-up hurts a lot because of the damage, follow-up, the basic attacks even, the crusher damage after the fact, the Runeforged Hammer proc as well. So Shrimp Gang with a 5-on-4 power play, they didn't really utilize it in terms of anything outside of the tier 2 tower.
Well, Big Money now need to start setting up a little bit more for Panda Mid, in my opinion. I mean, look how much he has now by way of penetration. He has the Divine Rune, the Ob Shard, and even working on likely the Spear of Magus to round it out. And remember, he has the Book of Thoth and Warlock Staff as his power bank items. Snato's in a bit of trouble, but the perfect zoning of that Tornado slows everything down.
Snato's not afraid to use that ultimate defensively. That's the second time in less than 2 minutes he's been doing that. And with 40% cooldown reduction between Shoes of Focus, Breastplate of Valor, Shield of Regrowth, you might as well be liberal with that ultimate, knowing it'll be back up before the next team fight.
I think so too, and Shrimp Gang are being liberal with when they choose to initiate. Privative still didn't have beads, 3 seconds away, so he does get stunned, but Shrimp Gang can't keep going. But more importantly, Panda Mid's beads are now down.
Going to be looking for that as Shrimp Gang. Jumpa away from Snatos, not in plucking range. Right side, Pyromancer's about to respawn. I don't expect Shrimp Gang to be Fire Giant, but maybe for the little one.
Maybe at least try and bait them in. Remember, their priority target, Panda Mid, is more vulnerable now. Still has the ultimate, still has Aegis, so he still has some chances. But this is exactly when Shrimp Gang want to try and force Big Money to overcommit. But if I'm Big Money, I still feel good. I mean, we've made our way basically to the late game without too large a deficit. 9K is a lot, yes, but the later that we get, the closer they get to these full-built items, the less that it matters. I mean, they're almost 6-slotted across the board.
They're not worried about even a Fire Giant fight. Honestly, Shrimp Gang can easily steal it away with Spirit of the 9 Winds. No one from Shrimp Gang can outburst damage
Absolutely
that
not.
one particular ability. So, and that's the same reason why Shrimp Gang aren't starting it. They're too afraid of that ultimate. So if they can bait that out, then they'll go for the objective. Or maybe they just want to bait out some of the frontliners to get them out of position.
Well, this is the call now. They just saw Conviction on the map because he was clearing those minions over by tier 2, and that might be why they're willing to go. His ultimate is certainly still good, even from this range, but they won't be there for that physical damage, so they're considering the FG, but they drop it. Snatos has come in, they want to pick him out, but the Sobek too slippery, and he gets away.
Abduct on the mark onto Xerxes. This is when the damage starts.
Oh, it's a lot of damage too. Xerxes already down to half HP. Jumpa biding his time to when to go in. They force out the Watery Grave, but look at Snatos lurking around the back. He can't find his way in. Shrimp Gang have to play this so carefully.
Because of the Oni minions, that's why we saw the rotation from Conviction.
That might
making
be it, yeah.
sure that each lane is balanced and in check. The right side of the map didn't matter because the tier 2 tower was already taken out, but Snatos using that ultimate is Nikwit trying to get the beats out of Conviction.
He knew that Panda Mid didn't have them. That ultimate almost gets the backline. It does. It hits Zaxi and brings him low. Ultimate comes through and he doesn't quite get executed, so he's still alive. Has to airstrike defensively, and it's Privative who falls. Once again, the target they commit on lives with that Scarab's Blessing as extra help, and Shrimp Gang have the 5v4.
And without the ultimate now from Panda Mid, this means go for Shrimp Gang. Once Zaxi comes back with the Jingwei passive fully healed up, it's going to be an easy opportunity to confirm the enhanced Fire Giant.
And Big Money will have a very difficult time stealing. Even without the ultimate, If Panda Mid could at least get close to drop Tornado, that could certainly still cause some problems, so they have to still be careful, but this time they should be able to secure if they do all things right. Zaxy's going to grab the red buff first, so they're still not ready to start.
An interesting Soul Eater pickup from Jumpa. At the very late stages of the game, Xerxes going to use that Watery Grave just to peel for himself, but the chase is still on. Jumpa wants it.
Once again, the initial hit does not land, but they again get the ultimate out from Panda Mid. That cooldown was way lower than I was expecting, so you had that one available again, but it's forced out by the aggression of Shrimp Gang on the right side of the map, and now they can feel very good about falling back to the FG.
It was that sentry ward right underneath the back camps, between the back camps and the speed buff that identified where Panda Mid was, so they read that ultimate like a book. And Shrimp Gang is just dancing around with Big Money Esports around this jungle side, trying to bait out the Tornadoes, trying to bait out Snados so that they could look for the root abduct combo.
It's close to being too patient, though. You don't want to let this comp from Big Money get all the way fully into their late game stride. It'll be difficult to take down. So as well as Shrimp Gang have played it, the trigger needs to be pulled sooner rather than later. Almost 36 minutes on the clock, and still they hold on. The Enhanced Fire Giant is hard to burn. That is very true.
Oh, yes.
So I get why they're giving it its due respect. And Big Money have been very patient in their responses.
They could also be waiting for a couple relics in their own right. Matt Coy still needs 35 seconds on Shell, 20 seconds on the sprint, about 60 seconds until Zaxy has the Aegis available to him, 50 seconds on Jumpa's Blink, and that could be enough to force a fight with the Blink Pele late game.
And part of the problem is for Shrimp Gang is that they have not been able to blow up this front line easily enough either. Snados and Xerxes have been stepping in forward to stop them on the Fire Giant and both been able to make it out multiple times. Is it not enough lockdowns, not enough pin? Is it just these gods are too good at getting away? Why have they had trouble killing these tanks?
Because they don't want to group up too clumped together next to that tank that they're all focusing out, expecting Panda Mid to play defense with the Tornadoes, with that Spirit of the Nine Winds. That damage could allow Privative to really pop off with one execute. So yeah, they could bait out Xerxes and Snados all they want, but they can't fully commit to the target. It has to be through a step process where you poke them out, maybe you bait out an ultimate defensively, as Snados and Xerxes has been liberal with that escape plan, as they should be, by the way. So Shrimp Gang just a little bit too hesitant about steps 2, 3, and 4, because they definitely have gotten the ultimates from Snados and Xerxes on step 1.
Well, a nice win for Shrimp Gang to grab that Primal Fury. That should make this Enhanced Fire Giant that much easier to burn down, a necessary step in the late game to be able to secure the objective for yourself. But like you said, unless they can find some kind of way to burn through these frontliners a little bit more efficiently, they might never have the space they need to actually claim the objective for themselves. And Big Money have been real patient with their responses. They've done one or two things, like maybe Snados' ultimate, maybe Xerxes', maybe Convictions, one piece of that puzzle to get their team back out so they still have enough to threaten if Shrimp Gang commit.
Shrimp Gang are still going to be grouping up on the right side of the map. Snados not going to get rooted there, just narrowly avoiding that one. Good mobility on the Sobek between that Shield of Regrowth, the Shoes of Focus, the Winged Blade. Difficult to really lock down the Sobek.
Difficult indeed. I like that Conviction went for this Ken Size route. A lot of HP, especially like in Niquid's build in particular.
Yes.
He'll be able to chunk through that quite well, especially as there's not really much dedicated physical protection. The Void Shield's there, Spirit Robe 2 to kind of flex into that, but Conviction should be able to blow up the Bellona without too much trouble.
Curious where Conviction is going to go once he sells off the Ninja Tabi for that 6th item. Maybe going for an Ichevol to limit some of the attack speed options.
Maybe Odibo?
At a jump. Odibo wouldn't be a bad idea either, just to hit the tanks, spread it out into the backline. But I'm thinking of ways of surviving against Jumpa.
Sure.
So I'm thinking either Poison Star or the Ichevol.
Ichevol could be good to slow down Jumpa for sure, so we'll keep our eyes on where he goes as Privative takes a bunch of damage early on. Still, that's been one of the big problems for Big Money, is that Privative has not been able to find any means of ingress into this Shrimp Gang backline to execute much of anybody.
Healing off the back camps is a good way to stay relevant in this team fight. Matt Coy is going to eat the full brunt of that ultimate. That was a very early Scarab's Blessing.
Matt Coy, that's such an important cooldown for them too to hold on to. I wonder if that's enough for Big Money to feel comfortable moving in now. Did they see it?
It's got to be mind games. It's got to be mind games where Shrimp Gang are like, you know what? We're going to use this ultimate in front of your face. Do something.
Well, Covey does get pushed back into the ultimate, and it ends up hitting one at the very least to cause some damage. Covey pulled back as well, and Eagles Rally hits two to slow them down, but the execute off the mark from Privative, they will not be able to find that reset, and Jumpa punishes him summarily, though Panda Mid at the backside at least finds Matt Koiz.
Nickwood still in the back line, just avoiding the pluck against Snados. The Tornado is going to cut the fight in two. Xerxes trying to run away towards his teammates on the right side of the map, but Jumpa is not going to let this escape fall through.
No, he's not, but they had an idea that he was there. He slowed inside the Tornado, and it chunks him. Snados even comes in to put some damage of his own in, but it's too much that he's taking. I don't think he expected quite this much in return. Conviction tries to get in, but he's been disarmed, and with Jumpa nearby,
the Aussie,
he can't quite stand up.
The Aussie, and then the Aegis, he finds one kill. Panda Mid gonna get taken out. Conviction needs to find the second one, but Zaxi with a double of his own.
Can't quite take him down. 5-0-5 now for the Jing Wei, and that fight comes up all Shrimp Gang on the back end, and that felt like one of their best fights, but it did also feel a bit forced. Yes, the Matt Koiz ultimate was down, but if you're not finding the executes for Privative, I don't know how they're gonna win.
Yeah, Panda Mid's ultimate was not the best. It was a
also,
good avenue to focus down that corridor specifically, but everything just didn't align for Panda Mid at the beginning of the fight. Towards the end, it was good in terms of the Tornado onto Jumpa, keeping him in check, but it just wasn't enough at the beginning.
Snados is here to disrupt the Fire Giant attempt. He starts lurking in the waters, and this buys him some time. The Fire Giant has for now been leashed. But now that he's been crippled, that'll be the end of that. Zaxi cleans him up, but that did buy time for Privative to tag in and try his hand of the defense, but he's here way too soon, and he's not enough of a threat on his own. They continue the FG.
Nickwood doesn't have the Eagles Rally to help the DPS numbers of this Fire Giant, and yeah, without the Water Illusion from Privative, you got to give that one up. Panda Mid not even close after just now respawning. Nickwood doing a good outpost check to see if Privative is going to come back into it, and it took 41 minutes until they finally secured the enhanced Fire Giant.
It was not easy for them. It just took a bit of an overcommit from Big Money. And I don't even know if overcommit's the right word, because you're right, Panda Mid's ultimate wasn't very good either. When Panda Mid and Privative's ultimates aren't there, it's so much harder for Big Money to clean up any of these kills on the back end. Everything else was there. I mean, Conviction clearly had his damage when he was fighting Jump and Nickwood. So were the Tornadoes there from Panda Mid. They just need those ults to work.
And the fight should have been much better for Big Money, knowing that they killed off Matt Koiz very early in that engage with some of the Tornado ticks. The shell wasn't enough to keep the Khepri alive, but I think Conviction was a little bit low. He had to retreat under the right side lane. Everyone had to retreat on the right side of the lane. That gives Shrimp Gang that presence of mind of how to commit that pincer maneuver where Jumpa was flanking, keeping everyone in check.
Well, now that we're in the true late game, some items are starting to be sold off for the speed elixirs. Iqvile came in for Zaxi. Actually, a very greedy Soul Reaver coming in for Panda Mid to round his build out when he sold his boots. It was Odysseus' bow for Conviction, though he considered the Poison Star. I saw that first, but he must have changed his mind and sold that and went with the Odie bow instead. Emperor's Armor, I think, for Nickwood to round his build out. So we're getting to the point where boots are out of there.
A lot of attack speed there. Matt Koiz with the Shogun's Kusari as well, trying to boost up the Jingwei numbers. As if the Aussie, Iqval, Executioner, Chin size wasn't enough. Let's add the Shogun's Kusari to it. I like the idea. We're seeing double shell from Big Money. Snado's even picking it up. And the basic attacks from Jumpa is going to hurt, but the shell proc from the upgraded version doesn't stop the AoE damage from the Volcanic Lightning.
Oh, we talked about this already, and Kukulkan's very good at exactly this. Dropping down the Tornadoes on the minion waves from a safe position and making it hard to siege. The problem is, though, Privative is nowhere near a match for Jumpa over here on the middle lane, so Jumpa's threatening that Phoenix better than his entire team is in left.
A 4-1 split, left into mid. Snados trying to see if he can find the right plucking opportunities. Xerxes kind of showing some frontline presence.
Phoenix in mid's going down.
That's right. I think Privative got poked out too heavily.
That's what I was saying. He couldn't handle the 1v1 in that duel. Now he might have had a chance as Jumpa takes quite a bit of poke, but the left side Phoenix in trouble as well. Jumpa removes Privative, so that means now it's a 5v4 in favor of Shrimp Gang. They grab both Phoenix's mid and left and are continuing to surge, though that Tornado shuts it down.
They still have the ultimate from Panda Mid. There's still hope in terms of playing defense. 2 Phoenixes down. The last remaining right side is being looked at from Shrimp Gang.
Oh, man. Those Oni minions, they might have been too much. They're threatening as well. Xerxes gets pulled back in. Ultimate for Kuko Khan comes through and brings Covey down to critical condition, but Matt Koi's ult himself that reses him back, and he's still healthy to keep on fighting.
Still looking for it, maybe going for the end, but Covey a little too low, as is Matt Koi's, and Jumpa have health, but the Titan is at its most vulnerable form, Finch.
It's very, very low. There are no Phoenixes to try and keep it alive, and Shrimp Gang, I think, are considering the dive right now. They've got all the tools they need. Covey even still has his ultimate, but still they play it patient. For 45 minutes, they've waited, and Shrimp Gang aren't going to let this slip away now.
But they're not going to be able to do it unless they bullied their way into it. The Oba was doing so much work for Conviction.
Well, they bullied their way in now. Titan down to about half HP, well below it now. Shrimp Gang have the DPS necessary. They take down Big Money. It wasn't easy and it wasn't quick, but the win is there.
That's right. 22 kills combined between the two of them in 45 minutes of play. You could tell that they were a little bit worried about some of these late game fights, and for good reason. One Cuckoo Clan, one little slippery snake is all it takes.
And it's unfortunate, man, because I think it was just purely execution that kept this game out of reach for Big Money. The strategy was there, the patience was there, but they just missed a couple ults.
They had some good objective control as well in terms of sneaking the early gold Furies, but it just wasn't there for the team fights. Privative was not winning the 1v1s against Jumpa.
That's another one. Ao Kwang, I don't think, is the look for Privative, just from what we saw in that game. Some adjustments, though, need to be made by Big Money if they want to stick in this set. Let's get it back to the desk for their breakdown.
Thank you, Finch and Tolly. Shrimp Gang ended up winning this game, but it took them a long time, Taco. Not the dominant performance that I think a lot of people may have expected from this team.
No, it was rather back and forth for, I think, things looking so different on paper, at least. But I mean, it does kind of show that I think Big Money Esports at least understand the general concept of like how to appropriately challenge teams when they're looking for those big structure pushes and when they're looking for the big objectives like the Gold Fury and like the Fire Giant. We saw a lot of moments, though. I think one thing that both of these teams certainly struggled with, though, throughout this entire game that we couldn't stop talking about was just the builds.
They were bad. Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I mean, when you have 4 magical on either side and you have no Heartward Amulet and a Sovereignty instead, that's horrendous. When you've got 4 magical on your side playing a dot character and you save Spear of the Magus for 6th item, that is horrendous. I mean, you just have to do better at this level. That was a bad performance.
I had to do this just to remind myself that it really was a 6-item Spear of the Magus.
Yeah. When it's at its least effective. I don't know. I was truly losing my mind in the green room watching it. The builds needed to be better. It's the Runeforged Hammer on a Pele where it doesn't apply on knockups, so you're waiting for your team to CC and there's no consistent slows. All of it needed to be a lot better, and I'm hoping it will be here in Game 2 because that it can't be that much worse in my mind.
As far as the gameplay was concerned, I think team fight wise, I saw a lot of really important moments where big part of the reason why Big Money were able to stick around, I think, or hang with Shrimp Gang for so long is because that early to mid game portion. Privative, while the AO didn't necessarily pan out too well for him in the mid to late, I think that just the threat presence of that execution of the AO kind of forced Matt Koi's to play things a little bit further back. There were also some really nice lineups of abilities from Big Money Esports. I remember one instance, for example, where Matt Koiz is in the mid lane, gets forced out of the Scare's Blessing on himself, and Snatos actually waits until everything has already been expended on the chase to try and collect Matt Koiz in his Lurking in the Waters, was successful inside the mid lane with that one, and it was just small pick moments like that, but Big Money Esports kind of struggled with the consistency factor behind them.
Just needs to be a little more cohesive towards the later stages, and I agree with you. I think the big point for me is that Jumpa was able to consistently chase down Privative in the mid to late game team fights. I mean, he was all over these team fights consistently, and that's what you kind of expect, I think, from a world champion jungler right there.
Not the part where the ultimate gets whiffed into the right side mid Harpies, but I do like that this Pele was very clearly focused around keeping the AO locked out of the fights or keeping the Shibalanke pinned down at 30% health or less. Shrimp Gang just had so much freedom. I think a lot more than what they probably should have, in all honesty. But Privative just unable to find the final ticks of damage, couldn't win out on those 1v1 exchanges. I think as a whole, Shrimp Gang just understood how to deal with the late game a bit better. Plus, so many... I just don't think Panda Mid was able to connect with the Spirit of the Nine Winds
No, not very often at all. And Conviction just didn't put out enough player damage. If you're going for magical, you need to bring enough damage as the only physical to make them really respect it, and I just don't think that really happened. Maybe it was the sovereignty to deal with the one physical damage dealer built by Matt Kois. Maybe that's what did it. Who knows?
Galaxy Brain Kois.
There it is. Zaxi had a good game, though, on that Jingwei. 6-0-5, very high up in the player damage charts for him, nearing 33,000. In fact, he topped the player damage charts in this game. So if you're Big Money Esports, what are some of the things that you take away and say, if we do this better come game 2, we can win?
I think they just separated way too often and weren't really playing around Conviction's Darkest Night. A lot of times they would use the Darkest Night kind of awkwardly, where it felt like it was either too soon or too late, where the engagement's already so lopsided into Shrimp Gang's favor that having a little bit of a blind for a second or two isn't going to matter when you already know that your low HP target is still right in front of you.
We'll have to see if that's what they're going to do, if they're going to do a little bit better at that in game number 2 as